Hey guys, it's Ashton Bingham with Muse Themes once again. Our widget release today is our SubNav slider. It's a pretty slick little navigation system that's all-inclusive with what you see here. We have a 3-tabbed kind of master panel here on top, each of which have an array of sub-navigation links. And you can click through the various categories either on the tabs or with these arrows. And we get all kinds of interactive motion going on, which is awesome. It comes standard with all the icons you see here, as well as these big hero images with the onload animations. But everything is of course fully customizable and can quite simply be added to and or adjusted to fit just about any site. Let me switch over to Muse and do a little walkthrough here. Now let's take a look at my library. It's important to mention that this is another example of what we call our design widgets, where instead of being a widget completely constructed outside of Muse, it uses a default Muse widget as its base, just with some slick styling and design applied. In this case, a composition is what we're working with here. So just take note that if you have the widget bundle loaded in, you're not going to find this under your normal toolbox widgets, but rather in the nav section as labeled here. But before I drag this widget out, let's take a look at what we're working with here. I'm going to start with a blank page, but we'll touch base on that demo file that also comes with the widget download shortly. I'm working with a fluid width page, and the widget works great across all breakpoints. Now you're probably going to have more than 2 breakpoints set up, but for right now I've just set up 2 here so that I can touch on a little of the adjustments that'll be needed once you implement the widget. You're also going to want to make sure that your page width is unlocked with these arrows pointed outward in order to make sure those full width elements stretch properly. I'd also recommend that you zoom your page out quite a bit before placing this widget on your page, and you're going to see why in a moment. And you can do that with your zoom tool up here on the top left, or by simply using Control or Command and using the plus and minus keys on your keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and leave the page at like 50% for right now. And lastly, I'd recommend that when you place the widget initially, that you do so on your largest breakpoint. It's going to make it a little easier to adjust into your smaller breakpoints rather than the other way around. Now let's drag out the widget. And the reason I've zoomed out is because along with the composition, you're also going to get some onload animator widgets added on the left side. So having a zoomed out page will allow you to kind of slide everything over to the left a little bit before releasing your mouse. And by doing so, you can see it kind of keeps everything from being bunched up on the page, and then we can then slide things back onto the page accordingly. And we'll want to make sure we align the composition right with the top of the page and the left edge with the left edge of the page. Great. Now let's zoom back in a little bit and we'll do some breakpoint maintenance. Everything's looking good now on my 960, but as usual with Muse, things get a little shifted if I click down to my 720, which we can't control unfortunately, but a little adjustment here will do the trick. We're just going to want the brown header to align with the top of the composition, and then we want the entire composition to align with the top of the page and the page edges. Perfect. Now your smallest breakpoint will likely be the one you need to make the most adjustments on, and it's here that I'd recommend taking a close look at how we've set it up in the demo file, which we'll look at shortly. It takes just a little bit of rearranging to make it all uniform, but it makes for a really functional and responsive mobile submenu. So let's pop back out to our largest breakpoint really quick before switching over to that demo file, because I want to explain the anatomy of this thing a little bit. Now as I mentioned, we're working with a composition, which involves triggers and targets. Now we have 3 triggers to start, which are these 3 buttons here, themes, stacks, and widgets, and we can click any of them here in Muse to reveal the corresponding target. Now the target is the large area underneath that serves as the content holder, and in this case it holds a state button, which holds a group of icons and text boxes, which you can then assign all the hyperlinks that you need at your leisure. Now we also have these onload animator widgets, which are applied to graphic styles sub_nav1 and 2. Now what I want to do in this composition, I just want to click down to select just the state button that's holding the icons. And we can do that by hovering our mouse over everything. And the little tooltip that pops up will always indicate what the next click will select. So with nothing selected now, as I hover, we can see one click will select the whole composition. So I'll go ahead and click. Now another click will then select the target, so I'll click again. And now one more click will select this state button resting within. And when I do so, we can check the graphic styles panel to see that style applied. So let me go ahead and preview this in a browser. And we can see how all of these icons slide in from the right nicely. And they'll continue to do so as I shuffle through the different targets, thanks to our onload animator being applied to each state button. So before we close out, let's jump back into Muse, and I want to look at the demo file that will also come with the widget download, which matches the live demo we saw at the beginning of the video. Now I'm going to zoom this out here to 50% because there's a lot more going on here. Our menu and sub navigation are exactly the same, but what's going on here is that we have much larger targets. As I shuffle through the triggers, not only does our sub menu change, but our hero image changes too. Now if I quickly refer back to the original live demo link, we're getting these really cool on-load animations for each slide, just with different directions and different speeds. So for instance, let's take this stacks slide. On the initial load, we have these three kind of panel type things in play. The middle one stays put and just kind of fades in, and the outer two kind of slide into view like a sandwich, which is really cool, I think. So let's jump back into Muse, and I want to open that stacks trigger, and we'll zoom this into 75%. Now here inside the target, we can see three separate placed images inside. And if I open my graphic styles panel, I can select each one of these to see a separate style applied to each one, labeled screen 1, 2, and 3, 3 being this topmost one. So if we look over to our onload animators, and just a quick tip here, you can always hold down the space bar and click and hold and drag your mouse to manually move the screen around, which is pretty neat. Now our animator for screen 1, if I pop open the panel, we can see a fade in up effect applied, which is affecting that bottommost image in there. Screen 2 of the animator just has a regular fade in. That's the center of that sandwich, just fading into view. And then if we check screen 3, it has a fade in down effect. So that's how we're getting that sandwich type of animation when this target is loaded. Now all you have to do is place new images in the target and apply the graphic styles accordingly. Now let's take one more look at that live demo. I want to take a look at the themes slide. We get a really nice upward fade in on this image right here of our Karma theme. So I want to jump over to that target in Muse and try swapping out that image. So with this ready to go, I'm going to hit Command D on my keyboard, which basically brings up a Finder window to place a new image. And I'm going to grab this Slide 3 graphic from the Assets folder of this widget, which is currently being used on another panel here, but for the sake of swapping it out, it'll work just fine. So we'll go ahead and select this and place it on the page. Now if I select the Karma image before we get rid of it, we can see that we're working with a graphic style of comp. So we can now remove that image completely and drag the new one up into the target and position it accordingly. Now all I have to do is give it that same graphic style called comp, or I could even create a brand new graphic style just as long as it matches what's stated in the onload animator. And that's it. I can now preview this in a browser. And there we go. We get our upward animation as expected. And we can navigate away from this slide and back again, and everything is working shipshape. So that's it for now, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we hope you enjoy this new addition to our design widgets. It's definitely one of the more complex design widgets we're putting out, so take your time when customizing it and make sure to save often. Now, if you're already familiar with compositions, it should be a breeze. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.